Now, let's talk about what's happened in the last couple of days, the groundbreaking announcement from President Trump after his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Explain to me why you believe this is a seismic shift that will redefine the Middle East.
I wrote about this in my column in The Spectator here in the UK, and I think that this is a disruption of long entrenched failed orthodoxies, and it was Trump unveiling a vision that dared to reimagine the Middle East in completely new ways. Along with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, the two of them showed that the region can break free of these decades of confusion and violence which has been perpetuated by Palestinian rejectionism. It has been decades that world leaders have clung to these exhausted formulas, peace processes built on illusions and agreements predicated on fantasy, and generally a willful refusal to acknowledge the fundamental realities of Palestinian rejection of an Israeli Jewish state. I think that everybody knows if there was the prospect of a Palestinian leadership that could create a state and live side by side with Israelis, with Jews in the Middle East, then that would have happened long ago. But it's very clear that that's never been the agenda of mainstream Palestinian leaders and politicians. And that, of course, all came to a head on October the 7th. So I think what Donald Trump has done in expressing a desire to permanently change that situation in Gaza, and indeed in rejecting the very concept of a two-state fantasy, is entirely valid. And I think that the rest of the world's got to catch up with his thinking on this one.
And Donald Trump hasn't just rejected the two-state fantasy, he has completely rejected the UN and its bias in this area. He has pulled the US out of the UN Human Rights Council. He's cut funding to UNRWA. He wants a review of UNESCO. Again, and this is a dramatic departure from what we've seen in the past, Jonathan.
That's right. He used another executive order to give this forceful rejection of those long-standing UN biases against Israel. He removed the financial and diplomatic support from institutions that have systematically worked against Israel's legitimacy on the world stage. And the UN really has been doing that. The UN has been effectively bolstering and supporting terrorism among the Palestinians. So he cut all US funding to UNRWA, citing its infiltration by designated terrorist groups. We've seen those links with Hamas. We've seen that it's been corrupted by Hamas and other groups from October the 7th and beyond. And he also made sure that the US withdrew from the Human Rights Council, which Israel has now done as well, because that council seems obsessed with persecuting Israel. It has a permanent agenda item, which is to attack Israel. No other state in the entire world has that status, only Israel. So it's blindingly obvious to anyone that looks at it that this is a UN body which is designed not to protect human rights, but actually to attack Israel as some sort of human rights abuser, worse than any other state on the entire planet. It's quite ridiculous. And I think that Trump has done an amazing thing in signaling to the world that, you know, the leader of the free world, that America, at least under his leadership, is not going to put up any longer with that kind of UN activity. Even the UNESCO, which is meant to look after culture, has been actively working against Israel by trying to disassociate Jewish Israeli history from places like the Temple Mount and the Western Wall.
Jonathan Sacerdoti, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.